That's exactly what my termination letter stated. A $1 digital gift card, delivered through a sterile Zoom meeting. After 30 years of dedication to Wilson Technologies, this was my severance, a digital pittance that felt more like a slap in the face than a goodbye. James Wilson, our 35-year-old CEO with his Harvard MBA and perfectly curated LinkedIn profile, smirked at me through the screen, treating my decades of service like a footnote in his efficiency optimization plan. I kept my expression neutral, even as my fingers tightened around my mouse. "Understood," I replied, my voice steady despite the anger building inside. After the Zoom call ended, I opened my development environment. There, in the heart of the system I'd built from the ground up, I began the process of wiping everything clean. Some might call it sabotage, but I was simply following the termination protocol I'd written myself years ago. My final task, as outlined in my contract. Within minutes, the Slack channels erupted with panic. Is anyone else getting server errors? I can't access the cloud storage. The deployment pipeline is down. Messages cascaded across my screen in real time. Then came the frantic video call from James, his composed MBA demeanor cracking. "Michael, what's happening to our systems?" he demanded, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. I met his gaze through the webcam, feeling a calm I hadn't experienced in months. This was the moment when my calculated response to the company's next-gen leadership truly began. My name is Michael Chen. I'm 50 years old, and I've devoted my entire career to Wilson Technologies. I joined after dropping out of community college, making me the longest-serving employee in a culture where 2-year tenures are considered loyal. As the chief systems architect, I've built and maintained the technological backbone of this company. While younger developers came and went with their boot camp certificates and startup dreams, I stayed, quietly evolving our infrastructure. The work was challenging, but it gave me purpose. Even as I balanced the growing needs of the company with caring for my aging parents, I took pride in what I'd built. Alex, one of my most promising team members, approached my desk with concern etched on his face. "Hey, Michael, I think there's something weird going on with the deployment pipeline," he said, gesturing to his MacBook. I leaned over to look at his screen, the blue light reflecting off my glasses. "Ah, there's an issue with the containerization setup. Let me show you how to fix it," I explained, typing in the correction with practiced ease. Alex's eyes lit up with understanding. "Thanks, Michael. We'd be lost without your expertise here." I gave him a small smile, remembering my own early days of coding. "Soon enough, you'll be the one handling all of this. I'm counting on you to keep things running." Alex shook his head vigorously, his AirPods nearly falling out. "No way. You are irreplaceable. Why are you even talking like that?" "Well," I said, closing his laptop gently, "I've been thinking about the future lately. Things are changing around here." Being in his late 20s, Alex couldn't see the writing on the wall. The subtle shifts in management's attitudes, the new metrics being tracked, the whispered conversations about digital transformation. Back then, I still believed in the company's future. But everything changed when Robert Wilson, our founder and CEO, was suddenly hospitalized with a severe illness. His condition deteriorated rapidly, leaving no chance for a gradual transition. In his absence, his son James, fresh from his Silicon Valley consulting stint, stepped in as CEO. James launched his tenure with a TED Talk-style company meeting, live streamed to all employees. "This is a pivotal moment for Wilson Technologies," he declared, standing on the stage in his perfectly tailored suit. "We need to embrace disruption and agile methodologies. It's time to optimize our human capital and leverage cutting-edge solutions." His buzzword-laden speech initially energized the younger employees. James had that quintessential tech CEO charisma, the kind that plays well on social media. Having briefly worked with him during his listening tour of various departments, I wanted to believe he could carry his father's vision forward. But my optimism was misplaced. Within weeks of taking the helm, James launched what he called a strategic restructuring initiative. In reality, it was a brutal efficiency drive that turned our collaborative workspace into a pressure cooker. Teams were reorganized seemingly at random, with Slack notifications about role changes becoming a daily occurrence. But the most gut-wrenching aspect was his treatment of veteran employees. Instead of valuing their institutional knowledge, James saw them as legacy overhead. His solution wasn't direct termination. That would have been too obvious. Instead, he orchestrated a series of demotions disguised as role realignments. Experienced developers were suddenly transferred for growth opportunities to data entry positions. Senior project managers found themselves pivoting to junior support roles. Those who couldn't adapt to these humiliating changes eventually resigned, their farewell messages in Slack becoming increasingly frequent. I tried to rationalize it at first. If the younger employees he was promoting had shown exceptional talent, I might have understood. But their GitHub commits told a different story. The truly skilled young developers, frustrated by the obvious favoritism, updated their LinkedIn profiles and left for competitors. Those who remained were mostly James' loyal circle, former consulting colleagues and business school connections who could talk about synergy but couldn't debug a simple production issue. Today, I watched another notification pop up in our team channel. Another resignation. This time, it was David, a brilliant back-end developer I'd mentored for over a decade. As he packed up his desk, methodically disconnecting his multiple monitors, he gave me a weak smile. "Thanks for everything, Michael," he said, his mechanical keyboard the last item to go into his backpack. I forced myself to maintain composure. "But why? Your microservices architecture is the backbone of our new platform." He let out a heavy sigh, glancing at the culture of innovation poster James had recently plastered across the office. "I'm tired of fighting against digital transformation initiatives that just break what's already working. It's not worth the mental toll anymore." Then he looked at me intently and added, "But Michael, you're the only one who truly understands our system's architecture. They can't function without you." As he attempted a reassuring grin, I felt my throat tighten. I wanted to give him a proper send-off, but all I could do was watch as he badged out for the last time, another victim of our new, optimized culture. How many farewell messages had I seen in our Slack channels by now? You might expect such a mass exodus would trigger some kind of resistance, but the #general channel remained filled with forced enthusiasm and corporate emoji reactions. One by one, our most talented engineers left, leaving behind those too overworked to update their resumes, too resigned to fight back, or too loyal to James' vision. I was among the stubborn ones, still believing in the infrastructure I'd built. But the company's decline was unmistakable. The signs were everywhere: failed deployments, increasing customer complaints, and even James himself showing signs of strain. "This is just a temporary adjustment period," I overheard him telling his inner circle during a virtual happy hour. "We're in the classic J curve of transformation. The hockey stick growth is coming." I couldn't believe the arrogance in his voice, especially when his audience of MBA peers responded with a chorus of, "That's so insightful, James." It was clear he wouldn't acknowledge his mistakes. Frustrated, I returned to my monitor array in the systems management room, where Alex was waiting. "Michael, heads up," he said, his face concerned. "James is doing a systems audit today. He's been poking around different departments with his efficiency consultants." My stomach tightened. "What?" Alex continued, lowering his voice in our open office. "Word is, after all the team optimizations, he's now looking to cut costs in our infrastructure. They're talking about moving everything to some trendy new cloud platform." I sighed, minimizing my terminal windows. "There's not much we can do, Alex. James has a pattern of making cuts where they hurt most. His enthusiasm for disruption is admirable, but his understanding of our technical debt is limited." Shortly after, James arrived with his entourage of consultants, all carrying identical MacBooks with startup stickers. He scanned our monitors with the same expression he used when evaluating the office coffee machine for cost cutting. "Isn't the AC working a bit too hard in here?" he asked abruptly, adjusting his Patagonia vest. "Our carbon footprint metrics are concerning." I kept my voice professional. "The server room requirements are quite specific for thermal management." He barely acknowledged my response, turning instead to Alex. "Tell me about our cloud migration readiness." It was telling that he completely ignored my role as the principal architect. After walking around the server room, taking photos with his iPhone, James finally turned to me. "Michael, right?" he said, as if we hadn't worked in the same company for years. "Yes, Mr. Wilson," I replied, noticing him flinch slightly at his father's surname. "You've been here. How long?" 30 years, I answered, my AWS certification badges displayed prominently on my desk. 30 years, he mused, scrolling through something on his tablet. "I'm looking at your compensation package. It's significantly above market rate." Was that my father's decision? "Yes, it was," I replied firmly, feeling my jaw tighten. He glanced at Alex's workstation. "And Alex here is managing deployments now too, correct?" "He's learning the systems," I said carefully, not liking where this was heading. This was my first direct conversation with our new CEO, and despite my better judgment, I decided to speak up. "Mr. Wilson, I strongly advise against any rushed infrastructure changes. With all the recent team restructuring, our system stability is crucial. Moving to a new cloud architecture now would significantly impact our reliability." James' perfectly groomed eyebrows furrowed. "That's not your decision to make," he snapped, his carefully cultivated CO persona cracking. I fell silent, surprised by his sudden hostility. His expression was something I'd never seen in our virtual meetings: raw contempt. A systems architect questioning the CEO's technical strategy? He sneered. "Know your place in the org chart." "I apologize," I said quietly, thinking of the system I'd built while he was still in high school. He smirked, adjusting his Apple Watch. "You're the architect, right, Michael? Don't worry, I'll think about our infrastructure strategy thoroughly." His tone dripped with condescension as he guided his consultants out. Once they were gone, Alex let out a long breath. "That was intense, Michael, but you handled it well." I shook my head, closing my terminal windows. "Sorry, Alex. I didn't mean to create tension." "No, you're right," he said quickly. "Your concerns are valid, but James, he's not interested in technical reality." "What's his real agenda?" "Nothing good for the engineering team," I replied, starting to back up certain critical configuration files. Alex and I sat in silence, the hum of servers our only companion. After that interaction, we knew we needed to have a serious discussion about contingency plans. The writing on the wall was now impossible to ignore. A calendar invite appeared in my inbox. Strategic Resource Discussion with James Wilson. When I joined the Zoom call, James' practiced smile filled my screen. "Michael, thank you for your contributions over the years," he began, his background a carefully curated bookshelf. Then came the words I'd been expecting. "We've decided to terminate your position." I stared at his pixelated image. "Could you repeat that?" "It's not personal," he said with that same polished smile. "It's strategic realignment." He shared his screen to show a PDF document. "Your severance package." The file opened to reveal a $1 digital gift card to a major coffee chain. Something about the digital delivery made it even more insulting than a physical dime would have been. Why not a proper bank transfer? "Mr. Wilson, this isn't appropriate, even as some kind of tech-savvy joke," I said, my voice tight with controlled anger. "Oh, it's no joke," he replied smoothly. He shared another screen, a scanned document I recognized immediately. It was my employment contract from 30 years ago when I first joined the company. James zoomed in on a specific section. "Take a look here," he said with obvious satisfaction. "Your severance is listed as a digital compensation equivalent to $1. My eyes widened. Next to the standard severance clause, someone had clearly edited the digital document to include this absurd provision. The font didn't even match the original text. James highlighted the modified section with his cursor. "See? I didn't add this. It was already there in our digital records." "Interesting, isn't it? And you digitally signed this contract, didn't you?" I started to object, but he cut me off. "This is all according to protocol," he said firmly. "Clean up your Git repositories and transfer access. It's all in the termination checklist I just shared." His expression made it clear that any argument would be futile. I realized I'd probably been targeted ever since that systems audit. I was exactly the type of legacy employee he wanted to eliminate, someone who represented the old guard he so despised. The only reason I'd lasted this long was my control over the core infrastructure. But after seeing Alex handle deployments, he must have decided it was time to optimize his human resources. My honest feedback during the audit probably just accelerated his timeline. What a perfect example of modern tech leadership, I thought bitterly. A company run by metrics and buzzwords had no future. As I closed the Zoom window, memories of every farewell Slack message I'd read over the past months flashed through my mind. Their frustration, their helplessness. It all made perfect sense now. I forced myself to type "acknowledged" in our final chat, then closed my MacBook. My next stop was my Ide. Alex was already online, waiting in our private Slack channel, just as we had planned. "It's time," I messaged him. Alex's response was immediate, standing by. We began our work silently, our cursors moving in practiced coordination. Dismantling a system is far simpler than building one, and we had everything containerized for easy removal. Within minutes, the company's Slack channels exploded with notifications. "Is this down? I can't access anything. The CI/CD pipeline is completely broken. All our microservices are returning errors." The chaos spread rapidly across every department. Through the office's glass walls, I could see people frantically typing on their keyboards, confused by the sudden technical apocalypse. James' emergency video call came through exactly as we predicted. His face appeared on my screen, pale and panicked. "Michael," he shouted, his carefully maintained CEO composure shattered. "What have you done?" I looked directly into my webcam, feeling surprisingly calm. "I followed the termination protocol exactly as specified, Mr. Wilson," I replied. "What protocol?" "Your access credentials? Why is our entire infrastructure offline? Since the system architecture was personally licensed, I've removed it according to the termination agreement. I'm simply cleaning up my contributions to the company," I explained. "What are you talking about?" he demanded, his voice cracking. I pulled up the same contract he had so proudly displayed earlier, sharing my screen. "It's documented right here," I said, zooming in on a specific clause. "The core system architecture remains under personal license, with the salary structure covering ongoing usage rights. The agreement states that all licensed components will be returned upon termination. This has been in our Git repository for 3 decades." James stared at his screen, his startup founder confidence crumbling. "This is absurd. You can't just delete our entire cloud infrastructure because one architect leaves." I resisted pointing out the irony of a $1 digital gift card severance. Instead, I maintained my professional tone. "If you rescind my termination, I'll restore the system and return your coffee gift card." He slammed his desk, his virtual background flickering. "Alex, restore everything from our backups immediately." Alex, still on the call, hesitated before responding. "Yes, sir. I'll start the recovery process. But with our current architecture, it might take some time. I don't care how long it takes." "Just fix it," James snapped, his voice distorting through his AirPods. After exchanging a knowing look with Alex through our private Slack channel, I decided it was time to log off. I closed my development environment one last time, leaving behind the virtual workspace where I had spent so much of my career. My mind was clear, focused on the next phase of our plan. I was reviewing some personal projects when my phone lit up with Wilson Technologies' number. James's voice came through, sounding exhausted. "Michael," he said, dropping the CEO tone, "we're in serious trouble. Alex can't restore the systems, and we've lost a week of productivity, including all our cloud services." I could hear the desperation he was trying to hide. His Silicon Valley confidence had evaporated. "How is that my concern?" I asked, suppressing a smile. "Let's make a deal. We'll buy the system architecture. $100,000. No, $200,000. I couldn't help but laugh. Mr. Wilson, you clearly don't understand enterprise software valuation. That wouldn't cover a month of development costs. What do you mean? Then what's your price? $1 million, I stated flatly. 1 million? His voice cracked like a failing deployment. Yes, 1 million, I confirmed, checking my system monitoring dashboard. And honestly, you're getting a bargain. The entire infrastructure, including all microservices and deployment pipelines, is worth far more. This is extortion, he exploded. That's more than your entire severance package, which, as you recently demonstrated, was a $1 gift card, I replied dryly. Seeing he wasn't grasping the situation, I dropped my professional demeanor. Mr. Wilson, I'm serious. Without that $1 million, you won't get the system back, and I won't help Alex restore it either. There was a long pause, filled only with the sound of his agitated breathing. When he spoke again, his voice was ice cold. Absolutely not. I refuse to give in to this ridiculous demand. How dare you ask for such an outrageous sum after all this company has done for you? The call ended abruptly. I set down my phone, feeling more resigned than triumphant. His response confirmed everything about his inability to lead. I opened my laptop and began composing an email that would set the final phase of our plan in motion. Shouting echoed through the office's Zoom call. James, now the former CEO, was virtually facing his father, Robert Wilson. Though Robert wasn't fully recovered, his commanding presence filled even the video call. From my own home office, I watched the meeting unfold with a mixture of vindication and sadness. Why am I being removed as CEO? James demanded, his virtual background glitching with his movements. I'm not removing you, Robert replied firmly from his home recovery room. I'm demoting you to a regular developer position. You need to learn this business from the ground up. James looked appalled, his perfectly curated LinkedIn profile about to need serious updating. Me, a former CEO, coding like a boot camp graduate. This is humiliating. Robert's voice cut through the video call, making James visibly flinch. Humiliating? Robert thundered, his recovery room setup somehow amplifying his authority. You should be ashamed of the chaos you've created. You nearly destroyed our entire technical infrastructure. I remained silent in my corner of the screen as Robert continued his virtual reprimand. I was foolish to trust your quarterly reports, he continued. I explicitly warned you not to interfere with our core technical team, yet you forced out our most valuable engineers, including Michael. At the mention of my name, James' glare shifted to my video feed. He knew I had played a pivotal role in exposing his mismanagement. His reckless decisions had become intolerable, and I had felt compelled to bring the situation to Robert's attention. Despite feeling guilty about disturbing his recovery, I had sent him a detailed analysis of the company's technical degradation under James' leadership. Robert, who had been relying solely on James' carefully curated reports, was shocked when he saw my documentation of the actual system stability metrics. Realizing the company's infrastructure was at risk of collapse, he had decided to return to leadership despite his ongoing recovery. When Robert had told me, "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Michael," my son's optimization would have destroyed everything we built. I knew we had made the right choice. Alex and I had carefully orchestrated our response. We recognized that if James's strategic realignment continued, the entire engineering department would eventually be outsourced. So we demonstrated exactly how critical our internal infrastructure was by making it temporarily inaccessible. It was the only form of resistance available to our engineering team. As expected, the chaos that followed the system shutdown was massive. James couldn't handle the technical crisis, and even his MBA network began questioning his leadership. For the first time, our remaining engineers spoke up openly on Slack. We need Robert back. This digital transformation is destroying our platform. The criticism grew until James faced the board over video conference. Their assessment was brutal but accurate. They condemned his treatment of senior engineers, his mishandling of technical layoffs, and the catastrophic system failure. During the virtual board meeting, the topic of my system architecture came up repeatedly. One board member, a veteran CTO, pointed out, $1 million for a fully developed, production-tested infrastructure is an incredible bargain. Why didn't our CEO secure this asset? Building a new system from scratch would cost tens of millions and years of development time. Hearing their technical assessment validated the countless nights I'd spent building and maintaining our platform. After the board's decision, James sat in his home office, his perfectly crafted CEO image now visibly crumbling during the video call with Robert. "I'm sorry," he muttered reluctantly, glancing at my video feed. His apology rang hollow, his resentment still evident in every pixel. I kept my response professional, acknowledged. Robert, watching our interaction through the call, turned to me. "Michael, I truly apologize for this entire situation. Would you consider returning to the company?" His sincerity was clear, even through the digital medium. I smiled into my webcam. "Yes, I'll come back, as long as you're leading the technical vision." "Thank you," Robert replied, visible relief spreading across his face. Then he asked, should we process the $1 million payment for the system architecture? "That won't be necessary," I responded. "The company has already given me something far more valuable, a chance to build something meaningful." Robert laughed warmly, and I joined in. James, in his video thumbnail, stared at us with confusion, his startup metrics and KPIs unable to quantify this moment. Later, in a private Slack channel, Alex messaged me, "I'm so glad everything worked out, Michael. I was really nervous about our backup malfunction. You went through quite an ordeal." "You took some risks too, Alex," I replied. "Those weekend emergency response sessions must have been stressful." Alex sent back a smiling emoji. "If it means protecting our engineering culture, I'd do it again." Besides, all I really did was run some very convincing error simulations. I laughed and typed back, "Your system recovery failure performance was perfect. It was key to this whole resolution." Alex sent another message. James was unbelievable, though. A $1 digital gift card and doctored contract metadata. That's next level toxic. I paused before typing my response. "Actually, there's something you should know. That digital contract modification, I was the one who added it." "What?" Alex's surprised emoji popped up instantly. "What do you mean?" I smiled at my screen, ready to share a story I'd never told anyone. "Let me tell you about my younger self and how I ended up here. Back in high school, I was the quintessential computer nerd. I couldn't fit into the typical social circles, so I retreated into code. My room became my sanctuary, filled with monitors and the constant hum of computers. I spent countless hours developing my own programs, building systems from scratch. One day, Robert Wilson, who knew my father from the local tech community, discovered my personal projects. He saw potential in my obsession with systems architecture and offered me a position at his growing startup. For someone who had spent years hiding behind screens, his belief in my abilities was life-changing. He didn't just offer me a job, he offered me a salary that was unprecedented for a community college dropout. Robert's faith gave me a chance to step out of my self-imposed isolation. I still remember the day he proposed that salary. Even as an inexperienced developer, I knew the figure was far above entry level. "I can't accept this much," I told him honestly. But Robert shook his head. "This is actually a modest offer," he replied. "We're still a startup, and this is all we can offer right now. But as we grow, your compensation will reflect the value of your contributions. Your system architecture skills are worth far more." His words stunned me. In a moment of youthful idealism, I opened the digital contract he'd shared and added a small clause. I inserted digital compensation equivalent to $1 next to the standard severance terms. Robert's eyebrows shot up when he saw the modification. $1? He asked, puzzled. "Yes," I replied earnestly. "I already feel guilty accepting such a generous starting salary. I don't need additional compensation when I leave. This feels fair to me." Contract discussion. Though he must have found my naive idealism amusing, Robert responded with characteristic thoughtfulness. "Let's approach this differently," he suggested, sharing his screen to modify the contract. "We'll classify this system architecture as a licensed asset. I'll document that in your employment agreement and prepare the proper licensing documentation later. Upon departure, you retain rights to the system. If we need to maintain usage, we'll negotiate fair compensation." Wouldn't that be a more appropriate severance structure? I nodded, appreciating the elegant solution. "You saw right through my amateur contract modification," I admitted. Robert chuckled warmly. "You have excellent technical instincts," he said. "But business agreements require a different kind of architecture." That moment cemented my loyalty to Robert's leadership. He had recognized my potential when I was at my lowest, and his guidance had helped me emerge from my shell. When I finished recounting this story, Alex was silent for a moment before responding. "So that's the real history between you and the Wilsons," he typed, followed by a thoughtful emoji. "Yes," I replied. I never imagined that contract modification would resurface because of James. James' tenure at Wilson Technologies ended shortly after his demotion. Unable to handle the transition from CEO to developer, he resigned to launch a startup with his business school network. However, Robert later mentioned that James' venture was struggling to gain traction in the competitive SaaS market. Even after returning to full-time leadership, Robert faced significant challenges rebuilding our technical foundation. I hoped James wouldn't disrupt his father's recovery with requests for startup funding. "He needs to learn the realities of building something sustainable," Robert said firmly during one of our architecture review meetings. "It's like pushing a fledgling developer to handle production issues. Sometimes failure is the best teacher." I doubted James would ever admit needing help, even if his startup metrics turned red. His pride had driven him to resign, and that same pride would prevent him from acknowledging his mistakes. With Robert back at the helm, Wilson Technologies gradually regained its technical excellence. Alex and I dedicated ourselves to implementing a more robust, scalable architecture. The foundation finally felt solid again. One afternoon, I received a calendar invite for a private meeting in Robert's virtual office. "What's on your mind?" I asked, curious about the unexpected call. "I want you to join the executive team," he said directly. "As our new Chief Technology Officer." I stared at my screen, momentarily frozen. "CTO?" "Yes," he said, his voice carrying the same confidence he'd shown 30 years ago. "I want you to help shape our technical vision at the highest level. We need your architecture expertise in the C-suite. I hope you'll partner with me in rebuilding this company's future." The weight of the role struck me. Chief Technology Officer. It meant overseeing our entire technical strategy, guiding our engineering culture, and standing as Robert's key technical advisor. "Are you sure I'm qualified for this position?" I asked hesitantly. Robert's expression softened, as it always did when he sensed my self-doubt. "The next generation is ready, aren't they?" he said, referring to Alex and the engineering team we'd been mentoring. I nodded, thinking of the technical leadership I'd seen emerging. "Yes, Alex and the team are more than capable now." "That's not a concern." "Then let's begin," Robert said with a smile. "We need to prepare for the board meeting and draft your executive employment agreement." His emphasis on the word agreement made us both laugh. "Don't worry, I won't add any $1 clauses to this one," I joked. "I'd hope not," he replied warmly. The atmosphere in our virtual meeting felt charged with possibility, and for the first time in months, I felt genuinely excited about the future. As I closed the video call, a thought occurred to me. Could I, as CTO, help rebuild the engineering team we'd lost? The idea filled me with purpose. I was grateful I'd fought to preserve our technical integrity, even when facing seemingly impossible odds. This company had given me more than just a career. It had provided a platform to create, to mentor, and to grow beyond my introverted beginnings. It had become more than just an employer. It was a community that connected past and present engineers, building toward a shared vision. As I opened my development environment to start sketching out our new technical roadmap, I felt energized by the challenges ahead. For the first time in my career, I wasn't just maintaining systems. I was helping shape the future of technology.